Sir Jeremy Rudd.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for granting this urgent question. Thank you to the Minister for what he has said. But as you and the House know, the Intelligence and Security Committee has been considering redactions documents on the grounds that, if unredacted, those documents may prejudice national security or international relations. But it has become apparent to us that the government also intends to redact documents for other reasons, not specifically permitted in the humble address, or in some cases, to withhold those documents altogether. Now, as the Minister says, the government did issue a list of further grounds on which it intended to redact, along with the first tranche of documents that it published, including, as he says, email addresses and phone numbers and what's described as personal data, though there is, of course, no mechanism for the House to confirm that those redactions are limited to only what is necessary. But I want to ask the Minister about material that the government intends to withhold for yet further reasons, for example, due to commercial confidentiality or to protect the monarch. The government also intends to withhold some documents related to vetting in their entirety. Now, Mr. Speaker, I make it clear that my committee has considerable sympathy with the substantive arguments the government may make for withholding information beyond that currently justified in the humble address. There are, for example, valid concerns about the disclosure of information given in a vetting process, inhibiting future subjects of vetting or those who are asked about them from being as open and forthcoming as they need to be for vetting to be effective. But we cannot accept that the government is entitled to ignore or to unilaterally alter the terms of the humble address. So does the Minister accept that if the government wants to argue that the humble address is too broad as drafted and needs to be refined, it must come to this House and make that argument and get the House's consent for any alteration? Does he further accept that without doing so, when the next set of documents is published with information withheld, then the government will not succeed in persuading this House or the wider world that this matter is closed? And finally, does he accept that if the government takes it upon itself to redact or withhold information contrary to the terms of the humble address it agreed to be bound by in February, that would be an issue not just of process, but of parliamentary sovereignty?
Secretary Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In relation to the questions from the Right Honourable Gentleman about compliance with the humble address, I refer him to the statement I've made previously in relation to the principles set out in legislation and the motions of this House as I set out. I think he's asking me specifically about personal data that was collected as part of the security vetting process. And as I think he alluded to in his answer, the raw data that is collected as part of those investigations, which, for example, might relate to how much money you have in a particular account or who you may have had a personal relationship with in the past, that raw data would never be published, because if we did so, people would feel unable to answer those questions honestly and frankly in any UK security vetting investigation in the future, which would undermine the very basis of our national security system.